What's going on, guys? Welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be talking about the career mode in Esports Boxing Club. The other day I put out a community post on my YouTube channel, and I mentioned it before. I got loads of comments talking about my predictions for release date. Can we see stats for this fighter, this fighter, this fighter? Can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? And one of them was, can you talk about the career mode? What you would like, what your predictions are for it, things like that. So I'm going to be talking in kind of my opinion slash kind of as a whole, what I feel like the community would like for a ideal career mode. And I will be showing some of the stuff that we have already seen from career mode, because we've seen a little bit. People are saying that we need to see career mode. We've not seen nothing. We have seen some bits. Sorry guys, I just started laughing because my dog is right there, and she just done that heavy breathing that dogs do. So yeah, we've seen some bits for the career mode, and yeah, I just thought I'm going to show you guys some bits we've seen, and I'm going to be talking through what I think would be kind of the ideal career that wouldn't be scripted like the UFC and Fight Night games for Esports Boxing Club. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So for an example, throughout this career, I'm going to be using age from the age of 18 to the age of retirement. We're going to be saying that our career mode fighter is a middleweight, so 160 pounds odd and like 72.5 kg, I believe. So of course, you start your career, you make your fighter, we've seen the character creation, we make our fighter, we've made my fighter at the start. I always do like Andrew Young or Ray Taylor, let's say. We've got them made, middleweight fighter, we're ready for our amateur career. Obviously, they have mentioned there will be a WBC amateur title, so you'll be able to do the amateurs. So of course, early on you sign a coach. I'd imagine the coach would be pretty low tier, so you wouldn't get too many perks, too much experience from this coach. Obviously, then you've got the gym hub. They have shown it before, the ability to walk around, possibly talk to coaches, use training equipment, as well as pick sparring partners. That's all just kind of what we assume. We see a coach, we see different training equipment, we see ring. So the ability to walk around. And of course, we'd want this gym hub from day dot. You don't unlock a gym when you turn a pro. From day one of your career, everyone starts in a gym. That goes without saying, really, but just in case, I just thought I'd get that out there, that the gym is day dot. You make your character, and day dot, you sign your coach, and then boom, you've got your gym, and you have the ability to walk around in your gym. And then let's say we start with our amateurs. Now, we have the choice, obviously, we choose age, but let's say we choose 18. You have the choice to obviously have a few fights and then turn pro and learn on the job, for example. So you'd fight, maybe you'd get 10 amateur fights and then turn pro. That's a more risky path, because you're going to be fighting, every pro is going to have far more experience than you, so it's risk to reward. Yes, you may become world champion at a younger age, but you also might just be completely outclassed by people that have more experience, the fighters that you should have been beaten. Or you choose to have tons of amateur career and go pro later in life. But of course, you'll have a shorter pro career. So you could end up getting 200-300 fights of an amateur career in, but you might turn pro at 32 odd, let's say. Or maybe the Olympics, if they have it, that is a big if. You could win the gold medal if you can, if they have the Olympics, and then of course turn pro. So right off the bat, we've got three paths we could go down. We go down the hugely experienced amateur career, the minimal amateur career, or the Olympic career if they have it. So that's, three pretty decent paths for us to choose between. Not to mention that, in retrospect, you could have one amateur fight, 100 amateur fights, 200, 300, and leave the amateur ranks. You go up and down throughout the amateurs in the weights, win different national titles in the amateurs. So I think that's pretty decent. I think that path of unlimited freedom to just be an amateur if you want forever, I think that's something that definitely needs to be done. You shouldn't be forced to be a pro. Your coach maybe say, I think you're ready, but you could keep turning it down. You could say, you know what, I'm going to choose when I'm ready, and you go from there. I think that's a pretty solid path to follow for the amateurs slash Olympics slash early boxing career path. Now, let's say once you've turned pro, for example, just as a base career, let's say you're 23 years old, you're an active amateur, you were from 18 to 23, 5 years an amateur. Let's say you won the amateur title at middleweight, you finish, let's say, 34-2 as in an amateur career. Now, of course, you turn pro at middleweight, but let's say you can choose if you want to say, actually, you know what, I'm going to add that extra 8 pounds, or I'm going to lose that 6 or 7 pounds, whatever it is, to go down or up to either super middle or super welter. But let's say for this career, we choose to stick to the middleweight. So we obviously sign with a promoter. We've seen the promoter screens before. We know that they offer different rewards. So let's say you sign with a low tier pro promoter, and you get some low tier rewards at the start, but that's bound to happen. You're going to be starting fighting these journeymen, these easy fights. You've had 5 years amateur experience, you've had 36 amateur fights, only 2 losses in there, just as a base example for this career. So, we're ready for these pro ranks, these early fight these journeymen, we should be able to get them out there relatively quick. Now, with each pro fight, of course, you'll get this contract they've shown before, and I love this contract from everything from the cut to the rematch clause to injury insurance. Of course, a lot of these contracts will be really basic at the start. You know, you'll probably get a good 70% of the payout compared to the journeyman, or maybe actually you'll only get 30% compared to the journeyman because the journeyman will get paid more. But this contract will come in handy more later in your career when you have super fights against the likes of Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, Canelo, when you then have to split 60-40 for 30 million odd, something like that, you know. But all in all, this contract screen is one of my favourite things that I've seen from the career mode so far. So let's say you make your pro debut. Likely the first 5 to 15 fights, depending on when you turn pro, will be easy-ish fights with journeyman. You know, maybe then at some point, you know, you're 10-0, 15-0, the weight doesn't feel right. Your character is struggling too much to make the weight, or the weight is too easy. So you either go up to super middle or down to super welter. So you either have a more or less stressful weight cut, whatever you kind of want. But let's just say, for example, we stay to the middleweight division where we are, but you've always got that choice to put the weight up or down if you want. Let's jump forward. Let's say we're 21-0 as a pro. We're 28 years old. And we've been fighting, you know, let's say 4 times a year. So, you know, we were still quite young in the game, 21 fights in, 28 years old. You know, we've won, let's say, some national titles, some British, English, European, whatever they may be, because they have mentioned national titles. For example, the Lord Lonsdale belt they've mentioned. So let's say we won a few national titles as a Brit, you know, the English, like I said, the British, the European, whatever it may be, wherever you are, wherever you place your fighter in the world. Then let's say you get offered a middleweight title fight, big money, big event for once. You win the world title, you have your first defense as an A side, you then choose to go up to super middleweight, you vacate your title, so you've won the middleweight title. Let's say you just won the middleweight WBC, you vacate it after one title defense, you choose to go up to super middle so you don't have to focus on the weight cut. Because let's say that last weight cut in middle was really stressful, you struggled too much, your fighter didn't get to train as hard as he wanted because he was so focused on cutting the weight. So you go up, you fight the #1 contender at super middle, and you're currently 24-0 at 29 years old. Now we're at super middle, you can tell why I've written this path. You're at super middle, you get the chance to have a huge title fight against Saul Canelo Alvarez for all of the belts. That's at 29 years old. So all the belts are yours at 25-0. You're currently holding the WBC, the IBF, the IBO, the Ring Magazine, and the WBO title. You defend the title, let's say 7-8 times. Currently 33-0 with all the belts. 33 years old, but you now choose. You can go up to light heavyweight to have a super fight against the current champion, or you can keep fighting at your weight. So let's say we fight the current light heavyweight champ, and I assume that the legends will be in the career. So let's say the current light heavyweight champ is Prime Roy Jones Jr. So let's say you fight Roy Jones Jr. at light heavyweight, you take his belts. For example, he's holding, let's say, the WBC and the IBF. You win those, you vacate those straight away. You know, you've won the belts, you want to prove that you could do it. You've won a super middleweight title, you've won a middleweight title, sorry, you've unified super middle. You go up, beat Roy Jones, take 2 of his titles, vacate them straight away, and drop back down to super middleweight. You defend another 4 or 5 times, you're now 39-0-ish, you know, 35 years old, trying to stay active as a champ. But now you see that you're one of the best fighters, you get this huge opportunity to fight, let's say, up at cruiserweight. So jumping up all the way to a weight class you've never been before to fight a unified Lawrence Akali. Much easier to make the weight, of course, but maybe, you know, we decide we're going to dare to be great. And, you know, obviously you're going to sign a rematch clause, injury insurance. It's going to be a huge, huge fight. You know, you're going to be B-side, he's A-side. Big, big money on the cards. But, you know, you're obviously, you know, let's say we make ourselves a relatively, you know, mid-range 5'7", 5'8" middleweight, going up to fight, you know, a bigger man and a Akali, you know, who's used to that cruiserweight. That's a tough fight for sure. So let's say the first fight we win on points, but due to the rematch clause that we saw earlier in the contracts, and of course it was a huge fight for massive money, the rematch clause is signed, the rematch is set. Now at 40-0, undefeated, we've currently won a middleweight title, the unified super middle, won 2 titles at light heavy, and now we're the unified, because we beat Akali for all the titles, at cruiserweight. The stress that we've put our body through, our fighter through, having an absolute war with Akali in the first fight could definitely affect the way our fighter performs in later fights. Not to mention that we're already now mid-30s. So let's say now at 40-0, we lose on points by split decision. So obviously now we've got no titles. We choose to vacate the super middleweight titles because we don't want to go back down to avoid the big weight difference and affect our fighter even more with the up and down with weights. We choose to stay active at cruiserweight, which maybe is a risk, but we fight the #1 contender. We win, push ourselves through to 41-1, for example, and then we have a third fight with Akali. It's a huge fight, massive trilogy, you know, big build-up, weigh-in, press conferences, you know, the post-fight interviews we've had had after the fight, you know, after our first ever loss with Lydia Daedalus, you know, she's interviewed us and said, you know, how'd that fight? And you're like, well, you know what? I'm going to stay active at cruiserweight. I'm going to vacate my super middleweight titles, and I'm going to stay in this weight class. I'm going to earn my shot at the titles. And, you know, Lawrence Akali's got to recover. We've been through war, but we choose to stay active and fight the #1 contender at cruiserweight. So at this point, we are older, we're keeping our body safe. We've had our first loss, 41-1. We've not been knocked out, but we had a tough loss to Lawrence Akali by split decision. So now we can train at that weight, at that cruiserweight. We can bulk up and stay at that weight and train harder and not put our body through as much torture of cutting and going up and cutting and going up. We're just staying there. So let's say the third fight is an absolute brutal war. We win by 11th round KO. Now 42-1, but given our smaller size, being a small middleweight, the defenses are becoming hard. You know, we walk away at, let's say, 45-1. So we've had 3 title defenses. You know, every time the questions at the end of the post-fight interviews are, you know, Lydia saying, you know, this was a tough fight. What's next for you? And at 45-1, we say, you know what? We're going to retire right now. This is us done. 45-1. You know, we've won titles at middleweight, unified super middleweight, titles at light heavy, unified cruiserweight, twice losing them, winning them, losing them, and winning them again. It's time for us to walk away from the game. Obviously, the wars of Akali, let's say, would push us to be less active because our fight took such a hammering, you know, going 24 rounds, not including the 11th round KO afterwards. So we retire at, let's say, the age of 38, 39. Now, while we're gone, we see a new super middleweight rise through the ranks, unifies the division, and now the fans, obviously, you know, on social media are talking, in a dream world, who would win between this new super middleweight champion and the old Andrew Young? You know, who would have won Prime versus Prime? Despite us now being 41, we've decided to come out of retirement. As they've mentioned on the website, that you can retire early and make a comeback, or you can just bomb through your career. So we've retired at 38, relatively youngish, you know, for someone of this level. So let's say we come back at 41 years old, 3 years out the game. We've used this ability to come back, make a big hype fight for ourselves, you know, and we're ready. We're going to jump straight into this massive fight, back down to where we unified the division the first time at super middleweight. You know, that we don't have to bulk up as much. We're not fighting someone that's a giant in comparison to us. So it's a huge fight. And we've used, yet again, another one of these systems that they have mentioned is available in Esports Boxing Club's career mode. So now we come back for a super fight, you know, 45-1. We're 41, 42 years old to fight a new, young, unified champion. We're not in our prime, but still one of the best to ever do it. Now, do we win? Do we lose? Who knows, guys? That is not something I'm going to tell you guys, but that is just an example of a career that you could make. And I've used a lot of the features they've mentioned in the post-fight interviews, the amateur ability, the ability to win amateur titles, the using the contract, the post-fight interviews, the retirement system, the coming back system. I've used pretty much everything, all the big systems that you guys are like, whoa, they have actually mentioned already there. The only thing we don't know for sure is that we can move up and down weights freely. The contract dictates that you would be able to, because it shows a weight limit that you have to make. So chances are you will be able to fight up and down wherever you want. But as a career as a whole, you know, we've made millions, we've changed boxing, you know, maybe we didn't retire undefeated, that's what it is. We had that one loss, who knows how that super middleweight huge fight went when we were way past our prime. We didn't have the best or most experienced amateur career, but we had a career full of crazy fights, 35 plus KOs, for example, 20 years a pro. And honestly, that career could have gone any which direction at any point. I could have changed it and we could have stayed at middleweight forever. We could have just gone up to super middle and stayed there forever. We could have waited for constant competition. We could have not vacated the light heavyweight titles. We could have rematched Roy Jones Jr., but we chose not to. So maybe the fans and, you know, Roy Jones is always like, you know, he beat me that one time. He got lucky, but he's ducking me after that. You know, we never had that rematch. So who knows if I was really better than Roy Jones Jr. because, you know, I only had the one fight. Maybe it was a lucky knockout. And there's so many paths that you could take. All they need to do, in my opinion, is give us the freedom. As long as the promoters sort the fights, the coaches train us, all we need to do is have the freedom to choose as a fighter what weight we want to fight at. As long as we've got the hype behind us and we've built up the hype and we've built up the credibility as a fighter, we should be able to say, you know what? I've won these belts, now I see the fans talking, now I want to see how good I am. I'm going up to this weight and I'm challenging, or I'm dropping down to this weight. You know, maybe we are already quite a middleweight that needs to put on a lot of weight, so we just cut down to super welter, then welter, and we take on different fighters in that direction instead of going up in this direction. So there's so much that you could do with it, not to mention that I mentioned, you know, Akali and Roy Jones. But you've also got fighters that I could have mentioned, Joe Smith Jr., Alexander Usyk, of course. We could have jumped up to heavyweight and risked it all to fight Tyson Fury or Muhammad Ali. If they give us the freedom, this could really be insane. But like I said, guys, a lot of the things I've mentioned, the contract, the gym hub, the post-fight interview, things like that, they're all things, the retirement system, they're all things that they have mentioned already. So this isn't out of the realm of possibility. All I'm doing is just giving myself, this character, the freedom to move weights and using his hype to project him and propel him to new levels of hype and fighting bigger and better champions to have a huge career. Of course, I could have written a whole different one where we went 274 wins and 10 losses in the amateurs and joined the pro ranks at 32 years old, and 4 fights in we had a title fight and we won, and we stayed at, I don't know, off the top of my head, welterweight, and we dominated the welterweight and we retired 24-0, but we consistently beat #1 contenders, champion all the time. People were coming up, people were coming down to fight us instead of us moving the weight. It was always on our terms. We were A-side all the time. We dominated the division. That could be another path that you choose. It's simpler than this, but this builds a lot of big fights all the time. But I just want to talk about it. That's kind of my ideal path for a career mode. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And like I said, guys, as long as they just give us the freedom and kind of make, somewhat hype a thing. And, we've seen the fan count before, that there's fans and stuff like that. So as long as they make that count, because in modern day boxing, that's what it's all about, Like Canelo, he went up to fight Kovalev at light heavyweight. No real reason to do that, except he just wanted to. He's the pound for pound king. He can do it. And that's what I'm thinking. If we become the pound for pound king, we should be able to be like, you know what, I want to challenge myself up at this weight. This champion, Lawrence Akali might have been interviewed and said, there's not a single champion near me that's as good as me. Super middle, light heavyweight champions, they don't bother me. I'm the best. And we're like, hold on a minute, that's us. All right, let's throw down. So, you know what I mean? So as long as they give us freedom, I think it could really be something special. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you as always for watching. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Peace.